The Informal Economy Development Forum is a new body set up to drive growth in the informal sector. Now, it aims to support the sector's workers and to function as a conduit between government, corporate South Africa and the informal economy. Now, the IEDF's key objectives are to improve the business, labour and regulatory environment in which informal businesses operate. Let's find out more now from the forum's chairperson, David Fentu, who joins us virtually from Cape Town. David, thank you so much for your time this evening. This can only be a positive development in the sector. One can only feel that after the 2 and a bit years of this COVID-19 pandemic, where right at the start, the informal sector was the one that was hit the worst. We can all remember those pictures of informal traders on the streets being dragged off because they didn't have the right paperwork, they didn't know they needed certain paperwork, and the list went on. This is a sector that really needs proper representation at the highest level because they form such an important part of our economy. What are you hoping to achieve with this?
Good evening, Marcel, and good evening to the viewers. The IEDF, and I think just before I get into exactly what you're asking, Marcel, I think it's important for us to just understand the definition of what the informal economy is, because that talks directly into our strategy. So many times the term informal economy is mistaken to mean the very same thing as the informal sector. Now, the informal sector represents informal business owners and simply puts unregistered businesses, and also one would say one man or one woman businesses who, let's say, employ their family. So I get paid based on what my business makes. That is what you define as the informal sector. A second component are what is termed the informal employees. Those are the workers working for informal businesses, those that are employed and needs to get paid. Now, the addition of both informal businesses and informal employees, that equates to the definition of informal economy. So when we talk about the Informal Economy Development Forum, we're talking not just about informal businesses, but an inclusive approach looking at both businesses, informal businesses, as well as informal labor. So when one looks at wanting to assist the informal economy, which is where we are, you cannot just look at business owners and not look at the employees of those businesses simultaneously. So we are looking to support government, work very closely alongside government, especially the Department of Small Business Development, in achieving their target in the formalization of those businesses who are ready to move from informality to formality. And within that process, to see how we work together with informal sector partners, informal employee partners, as well as corporate SA and government departments, get everybody to work together so that ultimately, Marcel, we can grow these businesses to a point where we can create employment.
Now, obviously, one of your main aims will be to be a conduit between government and the sector that you represent. But what will be your first step? I would assume one of the first steps would be to communicate what your goals are to those that you're hoping to represent. But that's going to be pretty difficult, I suppose, to get the message out there. What are your plans to be able to do that?
Difficult is, you are 100% correct. I almost wanted to say it's an understatement. I mean, what we are doing is historic in its very nature. It has never been done. If one understands the informal economy, and government, corporate SA, everybody has tried this, one would understand that the informal economy in itself is a very fragmented economy, or let's even break it down to, let's talk about the informal sector. It's very fragmented based on its informality, not having proper technology or infrastructure where one could easily connect or share information with, and I mean, the informal economy in itself, we're talking about in excess of 5 million people.
Sure.
So when one looks at informal sector businesses, you are looking in the region about close over 3 million businesses. How do you connect with them? So what we are doing as the forum, and this is the beauty of the IEDF and the historicness of this whole thing in itself, is that we are a collection of the largest national member-based organizations operating within the informal economy. These leaders are coming together with the IDF, together with corporate, together with government, to see how we can work and support informal businesses. In the past, it's always been a case where government works in isolation of the informal sector, or corporate SA worked in isolation of the informal sector. And for years we have been saying, include us. We are the experts in the space. Let us work together. And finally, that has now come to pass with the formation of the IEDF.
I think I read a figure somewhere that said that the South African informal economy accounts for 17% of the country's employment. And with our current unemployment figures being what they are, that is the sector that we will have to start looking at to try and find those jobs that are just not coming from anywhere else. Do you think that there's enough respect from other sectors of the economy and government for what the informal economy actually does to keep bread on the table of millions of South Africans?
That answer can be answered in two ways, Marcel. I think it's more, I wouldn't maybe use the word respect, I would more use the word ignorance, in the sense of not fully understanding the culture of the informal economy, not understanding how the sector operates. So I think it's a case of ignorance, of not knowing, which creates maybe a perception of disrespect. If one looks at the efforts that government has put forward, I mean, right now there's a budget that has been passed. Now in the period of 2022 to 2025, there's over 4.8 billion rand been made available for funding for SMMEs, with a primary focus on funding of informal businesses. A further 2.7 billion rands made available for enterprise and supply development, with a specific focus on the informal sector, and looking at 40% of that being women and 30% focusing on youth, with 7% on people with disabilities. So one cannot say that the informal sector is not recognized, because in government budget it's clearly stated with strategic approaches to approach and to see how we can support the informal sector. The problem has always been, how do we get the finance and how do we get the support to the informal sector? And this again is the reason why the informal economy has come together and said, let us work together with you. And as we are here now, that is indeed happening. There's a national agreement in place currently between the Department of Small Business Development, looking at CEDA and CEPA, as well as the informal economy. And we are sitting in the same room and we are discussing these strategies. So we are very excited, actually, as of now, for the next 3 years, just to see how we can work with government and to see how we can achieve those targets and get the necessary support to the informal, to all our informal traders.
Speaking of those targets with government, and this is my final question before I let you go, would one of the first things that you do approach with government be to try and get yourselves in a position to help fuel, form and change certain regulatory or legislative barriers that have an impact on the day-to-day lives of your members?
Marcel, that is what you're asking is absolutely critical. You are correct. And I mean, there are so many facets of one, and as how I can answer you, but let me just put one thing out there. In 2019, the informal sector, let's just talk about the business owners. In 2019, it was estimated to be close to 3 million informal businesses. Since COVID, 2 million people have lost their jobs.
Sure.
We estimate about 60% of those people have resorted to becoming informal businesses just to survive. So the latest figures haven't been released. But now look at this influx of informal businesses. Yet when one looks at trading spaces or trading areas that are available where traders can trade, those trading areas have not been increased accordingly, based on this influx of traders coming in, just people needing to trade to fend for their families. And that very thing has created such a lot of chaos, if one could even term it, of over-trading, even leading over to, in certain cases, xenophobia and many other things. So it's so important that, yes, a lot of these bylaws and regulatory frameworks need to be revisited. And this is exactly where we are and what we are doing as the forum. Again, it's not just the IDF, it's a collection of leaders, of presidents, of National Executive Committee members, all sitting together and addressing these issues with government.
Very quickly, if people want to find out more about the work they're doing or they're looking for help in some regard in the sector, how can they get a hold of your forum?
Well, you can just go to our website, www.iedf.org. You'll find our contact details there, Marcel.
Great stuff, David. Thank you so much for that. That's David Venter. He is the new chairperson of the Informal Economy Development Forum, joining us there from Cape Town.